Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sea Stories. I'm Duncan Hood, and it's great to have you here. We've got a real fun guest tonight. I ran across this man last summer when I was teaching a class, backing up to the dock at Navy Point, and up walked Pete Lesher. Pete, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. And is there a better place to meet than right on the waterfront?
Really, there isn't. Going backwards, full steam ahead with an anchor out the front. Always fun. All right, my friends, before we get too deep into this, I am going to do the typical thing, which is to ask you to open your chat boxes and just type in where you're signing in from. I'll do that from my end. And let's see if we can see everybody showing up. So we got it. Houston Palace. There we go. All right. That's right, everyone. There we go. We're coming in from Beaufort, Centerville. Oh, goodness, the system works. Newark. Great. All right, this looks good. Thanks, everybody. It's great to have you along. Nice to be here. Well, we've got a real interesting talk tonight. Pete's going to talk about marine preservation over at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, place I love to go to, and I think probably a lot of us do too. So, Peter, I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions and then we'll get into it. First of all, I'm very curious not only how long you've been at the museum, but how you managed to hook such a great title as ambassador at large.
Well, um, I've now been on the full-time staff for 34 years. It'll be 35 in May, but I worked uh, 5 summers before becoming full-time staff, and so I started as a dockhand as a fun summer job in 1986, and kept coming back. And my title changed over the years, curator collections, chief curator, and as we're bringing new people up under me, I moved sort of sideways from chief curator over to chief historian, and because they wanted me to have more of an outward-facing role for the museum, they tagged on ambassador at large.
It's a good one. I have to tell you that. It's a good one. Now, do you ever get out into the shop or is it all pretty much at the desk nowadays?
Um, do I get out into the shop mostly because I want to use tools for personal projects? They don't let me do real carpentry on real boats here, but they do once they've checked me out on a tool, allow me to make use of a table saw or planer or something like that.
Well, that's a great help. That's a great help. Now, tell me a little bit about your presentation tonight, and then we'll get into it. What have you got for us?
Well, uh, should I is this a start sharing
Oh, we
or
can fire it off right now if you like.
we can Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, where I mean, literally I've made my whole career. So yes, I was here for a number of summers starting in '86, but uh, I returned as an intern. I was an undergraduate history major. I went off to graduate school and completed a master's in history and came back for a second summer of internship to complete the work on the museum's small craft catalog, a heritage in wood. Uh, and there is a grouping of 76 watercraft that were then, as of 1992, in our collection. And the collection has grown a bit since then, but that was the internship project, which of course gave me this intimate familiarity with a key piece, a key portion of the museum's collection. And my I had just finished up the classroom work for my master's degree, and my predecessor, Richard Dodds, very conveniently left that summer for the Culvert Marine Museum, from which he has
Yeah.
now retired. And here I was, freshly minted out of graduate school, and in the right place at the right time.
And what a great place to land, that's for sure. Absolutely. You guys have made a mark on the bay. Ladies and gentlemen, as we go along, this chat is open for you to ask questions, but we also have a Q&A box. So if you'd like to enter a question over there, we'll review them as we go. All right, my friend, take it away.
All right. Well, uh, Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum uh, has been open to the public since 1965. We are a waterfront campus in the historic town of St. Michael's, Maryland, and it is a campus. And 10 exhibition buildings or historic structures laid out on this now 20-acre waterfront campus. And we were so fortunate that this came together because this point of land that juts out into St. Michael's Harbor was artificial land largely created by the seafood packing industries that preceded the museum. And the seafood industries were having some troubled years in the 1960s, and four different seafood packing houses that were on this point of land in the short period of half a dozen years went out of business. The museum was able to take this land that had never been all one property before because each of these businesses had separately extended their land into the water, filled in with oyster shells, the byproduct of their industry, had created this land. And so essentially, this was essentially brownfields industrial land that we put together. And the founders of this museum were farsighted enough to seize that opportunity and make it work. We now we now welcome 80,000 visitors per year. Uh, some 5,000 of those plus are school visitors, local from the five surrounding counties, six surrounding counties, uh, especially third graders and fifth graders. We do programs, curricular tied programs tied to them or to serve them. The museum is now staffed by, the numbers in the low 40s of full-time staff. We have that effort is supplemented by another 300 volunteers who are now giving about 24,000 hours per year. And what you see in the front of the screen is our newest acquisition, the Patriot tour boat, a boat designed by Jay Benford, naval architect of Easton, very distinctive style, who replaced an earlier wooden boat for the purpose of taking visitors out on the water. For years, this operated side by side with the museum. The museum grew up in the 60s and 70s, sort of anchoring the tourism industry. And right next to us, the Crab Claw restaurant followed shortly after. And the third anchor of the tourism industry was the Patriot tour boat, privately owned until 2 years ago when the then owner, I think the fifth or sixth owner, decided it was time to retire, and we couldn't bear to see this risk leaving St. Michael's, and so we've acquired her and are operating historical narrated cruises on the bay and charters and all the sorts of things that you do with a nice flexible open boat like Patriot is.
I was a little surprised by that acquisition a couple of years ago, and it's a perfect match. It's great.
It is. It is. Behind the Patriot, you'll see the lighthouse, and to the left of the lighthouse is our shipyard, a real hub of activity. Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum made the choice right from the beginning that we are going to collect, interpret, and preserve indigenous watercraft from the Chesapeake Bay and exhibit them in their original context, that is, afloat and operating, keep them sailing. And it only took a few years for us to make the decision to do the maintenance work on these boats in-house, to build our own shipyard. The first element of that was a traditional marine railway. Of course, today you haul boats out largely on travel lifts, other arrangements, but the Marine Railway was traditional on the bay, particularly starting in the decades after the American Civil War. There were some earlier ones in Baltimore, Norfolk, Washington, but the Eastern Shore saw these proliferate. And so we did this. And as it turns out, I think that was a pretty good choice because a marine railway for a fragile old wooden boat supports it from so many points. And it's really a very gentle way. It's not very flexible. You can only haul out one boat at a time, though we're looking for options to be able to haul out more than one at a time. But it does treat these boats very gently and that's been vital to our mission. We added a shop. We added other buildings. You'll see that big white tent in the middle where we've done some new construction projects. And right now we're doing a major restoration project, which I will get to later on in this presentation. But for so many years, the shipyard, and from the 1970s, the shipyard has been one of our most compelling exhibitions. It's it's a living exhibit. We're doing real work on real boats. We're not making this up. This isn't like a gun shop at a colonial village where we're making guns for the sake of the visitor. No, this is work that absolutely needs to be done to preserve these boats. And we're doing it in front of the public. We invite people in. There really are no barriers except for a temporary one if we need to get people to back off from a particular power tool or operation. They back off a little farther if we bring a crane in or something like that. But it is we hire shipwrights who are willing to put down their tools and turn around and engage a visitor, answer a question. Uh, Not everyone is cut out for that. There's some people who are very production oriented. They just want to get on with it. But we've managed to, with the crew that we've brought in here, to balance that. All right.
It's a hallmark of the whole museum right there.
Why is this not advancing my slide? So let me tell you a little bit about some of these boats that we've been working on. Rosie Parks, collected in 1975, right about the time we built that marine railway. A typical Chesapeake Bay skipjack, built in 1955. Now, think about that. This is 1975. It was a relatively new boat in 1975. The captain, Orville Parks, had a heart condition. His doctor told him, it is time for you to get off the water, and he sold the boat. And in choosing to purchase this boat for the museum, we went after the boat that had, at the time, the winningest record in the skipjack races. Orville Parks was a champion in the Sandy Point races, in the Deal Island skipjack races. And he also had a reputation. He had a great deal of pride in his boat. His brother had built it for him in having the best maintained skipjack on the bay. So it was for a young museum that had adequate capacity for maintaining a boat, but not for doing major restorations yet. It was a good start. The boat had been built in a typical fashion again, 1955, alongside two other skipjacks. Captain Bronza Parks, the builder, built it for his brother, built three of these side by side. And this was kind of the end of a mini boom in skipjack construction. Post-World War II, the oyster beds had sort of rested during World War II. There wasn't as much fisheries pressure on them. After World War II, lots of oysters, and watermen were prospering. They were making investments. They were ordering new boats. And so there were not a huge number, but maybe a dozen and a half new skipjacks built in that period, including these three. Built side by side. Rosie Parks was the first of those three to be completed. Uh, she was an elegant, she was a very pretty boat, not a transom-mounted rudder as some of the skipjacks had, but rather what the skipjack captains called a an inboard rudder. Uh, so there's a tiny little counter to it. You can see in the shadow lines there the fore and aft planking on the bottom back of the stern. Well, skipjacks are cross-blanked, so is Rosie, except for the last 6 feet, which allows for a little bit more of an elegant wine glass shaped transom. She had some sort of yachty touches to her, and I'll show you more of that. By the 1990s, Rosie was getting to the point where, yes, we'd done a lot of work on her. We'd rebuilt a section of the bow, a section of the stern, rebuilt her cabin, uh, but things were catching up to us, and it was time for a cycle of serious maintenance. And in uh, in 2010, now remember, think back to 2010, 2008, 2009. This was the beginning of the Great Recession. And the Great Recession impacted Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum as it did every business, every nonprofit, every person across this country. We shed a lot of staff. We pared back to fewer than 30 staff, and Rosie Parks was in rough shape. We got new leadership in 2009, late in 2009, and with Rosie Parks in this sad condition, he raised the money and said, it's time for this to be a major restoration project. As Rosie Parks was reborn, it renewed hope in the institution. It was the shot in the arm that we needed at all levels, staff and board and volunteer corps. Seeing this vessel get that investment was so vital to us at that time. We rebuilt Rosie in her own space. She had a continuity. We did not simply lay a new keel and build a new boat next to it, even though there was 90 some percent material replacement. Really, the piece that survived was the keel assembly, uh, the keel and the keelson. That, and you see that working in here in this shot. We that was still good. Um, but we rebuilt the rest of the boat in the space, piecemeal, but take one piece out, put it back. It doesn't work quite that way, but you can imagine uh, she, throughout the process, you could recognize Rosie Parks. It did have that continuous existence through this process. So complete topsides rebuild, deck planks. One of these boats were built quickly. They were built relatively inexpensively. Um, and Mark Bartow, who is our chief boatwright, I introduced him to the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic vessel preservation projects. He was a very good boat carpenter, but introducing him this ethic of how do you do maritime preservation with these skills? How is this project different as a museum project than you would do it elsewhere? And he got it. And I remember him coaching some of the younger shipwrights that, no, we're not going to do a yacht finish on this. We are not going to plane down these deck frames. The original ones were rough sawn. These are going to be rough sawn. Everything was not dimensionally the same as the original, materially the same as the original. Fir for fir, pine for pine. There are a couple elements of oak in here, but very little of that, because again, it was inexpensively built um, and relatively lightly built, which is probably why it raced so well. That's Mark Bartow. That's our chief boatwright coaching one of our apprentices, uh, India Gillum Westerman, in as he did all along. And here you can see clearly new elements and old elements side by side. There are new side frames in there. He's putting a new plank on. They're bending a new plank on, but there's still an old stem there. As this happens, that stem will get replaced. Uh, but uh, but this is being done piecemeal. So again, the boat had a continuous existence through the and 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 retained its shape through this whole process. I will talk a little bit more about apprentices, but apprentices are really important to what we do here. Apprentices have one, we're preserving not only the vessels, we're preserving the skills and passing them along to the next generation and training that next generation. Our own apprentices have actually been one of our richest sources of shipwrights. As people move on, you need to fill a slot. Well, we've worked with this apprentice now for 2 years. We've watched her build her skills. We know what she's capable of. She's fully vetted and she's got a good attitude. This one is a good one. We're going to keep her. We're going to offer her that position. And so we've grown our own very much time and time again in that way. And we've had a pretty robust apprenticeship program since 2000 or 2001. There were apprentices earlier than that, uh, generally summer long, but now from 2000, 2001, these were first 1 year apprentices. And then after a year, we liked some of these people so much, there was still more that they thought they could learn with us. And we started offering a second year internship. These are paid interns. So, well, I'll talk about this more, but you are earning more than minimum wage. You are provided housing as part of this, and you are emerging from this program with marketable skills and a credential. We are a state certified apprenticeship program and no debt.
It's
That's
huge.
powerful today.
Yeah, it's huge.
These are uh, two of our young shipwrights working on the deck. One thing you'll notice about this was one of the yachty touches, if you will, to the Rosie Parks. You see the deck, it's been laid with sealer. That deck does get painted. It wasn't finished bright. There were there was bright trim, still is bright trim on Rosie Parks, but not the decks. The decks are fir 2.5 by 2.25 and sprung or yacht laid. You don't see that too much on workboats, on skipjacks, but this was something that Bronze Parks did. He built yacht laid decks. There's a tension in there. There's an inherent strength in this. And boy, is there a lot of caulking. We had, and Shane Elliott, who you see there with the ear protection on the right, he
Oh, Pete,
loved
your
caulking.
connection's dropped out.
Uh-oh, what happened? I'm still hearing
Oh,
you.
goodness.
Duncan, I'm still hearing you.
There you go. Okay,
All
good.
right.
Got you back. You dropped for a moment.
All right.
Okay. We were at Yacht Laid.
Yacht laid decks. Uh, Shane Elliott, who you see there on the right, loved, learned caulking, loved caulking, embraced this task. And there are roughly 2 miles of seams on Rosie Parks that needed to be caulked. The lion's share of that, I believe, was done by Shane. He was a terrific guy, uh, and mentored others in the process of doing this. In 2013, after a 3 year process, we put Rosie back in the water. An average of 4 full-time shipwrights or apprentices on this at any given time through that 3 years. Could we have done it faster? Yes, but we didn't want to. We we saw the value of this project, documented day by day, the social media impact, the engagement that we got, the on-site participation in one aspect or another of this project was so powerful through this that you don't want to drag a project on too long. But 3 years is actually a pretty good amount of time, a pretty fair amount of time for one of these projects we've learned. And we've made a number of projects last last 3 years because of that. It seems to be a good period to be doing this. When we rededicated her, we brought the family back. This project reunified a family. Orville Parks, the owner's family, we had been in touch with them. His son Tom Parks had come back and raced Rosie Parks in a number of under the museum burgee any number of times. But Bronza Parks's family had scattered. Bronza Parks's family had, well, Bronza Parks, just a few years after this, Bronza Parks was murdered. He was shot by an angry customer, and died within an hour or so. Um, and the family just scattered after that. And we reached out and we found his surviving children, his grandchildren, some of his great grandchildren. And some of them at this launch met each other for the first time. It was really powerful. The relaunch of this, we sang the same songs. We learned about her original launch. We brought, I dare say, we had a larger crowd, but in the spirit of the original launch. And we retain a number of friends from that family through the years. The one of which on the left there in the black vest, Press Harding, gave us some of Bronze's original tools during this process. We built that trust, rebuilt that trust with the family through this process.
That's a powerful story.
Duncan, at this point, I'm going to pass it over back to you
Great.
for, as it were, I think, a word from our sponsor.
This is a pitch to ask you to join us at the American Schooner Association. Founded in 1972, the American Schooner Association is dedicated to the history, preservation, and promotion of the schooner rig. You don't need to be a schooner owner to join the organization, just to be interested in these beautiful boats. As time marches forward, the role that schooners played in the history of our country is fading too. Your membership helps support educational programs and provides a base for preserving these vessels. So, join us. It's inexpensive, important, and we'd love to have you along. We'll see you at amschooner.net.
And there we go, and that's part of my world. And as always, these sea stories are sponsored by the American Schooner Association and the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. And with that, let's get back to our friend Pete Lesher from the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum.
Thank you, Duncan. On to the queen of our fleet, the Bug-eye Edna E. Lockwood. Bug-eye is a peculiar type, and if you're not familiar with this, it is really home in the Chesapeake Bay. Both Maryland and Virginia produced a lot of bug-eyes in the years after the American Civil War, when oyster dredging was first legalized in Maryland. And of course, at first, you brought whatever boat you had to the trade, the schooner, the pungy, the sloop, oyster sloop. But the Bug-eye emerged as the quintessential Chesapeake Bay oystering boat. Now, for all of our schooner friends, you will recognize that this boat is catch-rigged. But the waterman would not have recognized that terminology. To a waterman, and frankly to the classification folks at the Bureau of Navigation, the Bug-eyes were classified as schooners. The masts were named fore and main, even though the foremast is the taller mast. To a Chesapeake waterman, there is no such thing as a mizzen until you get a third mast. If there are two masts, they are always named foremast and mainmast, regardless of the proportion between those two, foresail, mainsail. That's just the terminology that they used, and so that we use today. And so every year we do get an invitation from the from the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race to please come and sail down the bay with them. One of these days, maybe we'll pull that off. Uh,
I may
no,
hold you to that.
we're not a true schooner, but we use that terminology. Edna Lockwood was unremarkable in her career from 1889 to 1967, going out there for those 78 years, dredging oysters year in, year out, most of that time out of Cambridge, Maryland. An unremarkable story, except that Edna Lockwood survived. Typical in every respect, except for her longevity. Um, this, you know, the bottom of these boats, these are called log bug eyes, and the bottom was built, as the waterman would say, of logs. Now, some of you may have heard of Chesapeake Bay log canoes, and here is, if you will, a cross section of one drawn by a log canoe builder to demonstrate that these boats were chopped from 3 to 5 logs, that is, the log canoes were. The bug eye is the same idea, only enlarged to 9 or 11 logs. Edna Lockwood, 9 logs. And then the logs are joined. The logs then form the hull up to the waterline. We add planks up above that. The logs are then joined by iron drifts. And you can see those drawn in there. A hole bored in with a long auger, and then the drift driven in from the outside log into the inside log. And so there are no inside frames. There is no structure. It is just solid log. And that bottom in the center might be, well, toward the center there might be 9, 10 inches thick. As you come outside to where you might call it the garboard, probably 6 or 7 inches thick. Up toward the wing logs, the outside there, maybe tapering down to 4 inches thick. So, for an oysterman, you can dump those sharp oyster shells into the hold day in and day out, shovel them out. This is a boat that can take a lot of abuse. And we are building out of logs on the Chesapeake because this was labor saving. You're saying, how is this labor saving? Well, if you're building a plank boat, how do you get planks? Until steam sawmills came along, you rolled that log up on to you pit sawed it, right? You stand on top of the log, you send your apprentice into the pit down below, and you rip out that plank. Well, that's a lot of labor, and chopping, at least for a small boat, was a labor saving device. And it's until the large trees gave out that we needed to do this. This passed for a good idea. A lot of wasted material, but material was plentiful. Edna Lockwood comes to Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum in 1967. In pretty sad condition by this time. We knew when we collected this boat that the day of her big restoration was not far off, which is why it was good that we collected Rosie Parks in good condition, because we were facing this. And we took the lines off, drew them up by hand, the traditional method of lifting lines. And here you can see starting to put it back together. The logs remain intact, but because those old iron fastenings, those old iron drifts were starting to corrode away, we added interior frames. So double sawn frames added to the inside. It wouldn't be an unobstructed hold from this point on. And completed that project from 1976 through 1979, not because we thought a 3-year period was good for rebuilding, but it took us that long to raise the necessary money back then. became the pride of our fleet. Edna, in 1989, took a trip around the Chesapeake Bay in her centennial year, which the Maryland governor declared the year of the bug-eye in her honor. By the early 2000s, we were starting to see deterioration in the logs, and we probably caused this by adding those sawn frames and the metal fastenings needed to attach them to the logs. We created some iron sickness in the logs, and that the iron steel really rusted, expanded, blew the wood apart, invited moisture in. Moisture invades the vessel, and you get that rot that you see around steel fastenings. So with time drawing on, with this deterioration advancing, we planned a big project. But this time we upped our game. We brought in a lot of technology. We brought in the National Park Service's Historic American Engineering record, and they laser scanned this. Millions of points this is modern survey software. Millions of points, and here you see this is the point cloud of the bottom of Edna Lockwood. And you'll see in there some delineations laid in there where we could see evidence of the seams between the logs. And so we could sort out not only the outside and inside shape of this old log hull, but also where are the seams so we can sort out the component pieces. And the Park Service, for us, drew up all of those component pieces. This was how John B. Harrison started building this boat back in 1889 from these 9 loblolly yellow pine logs. We produced a plan for every single log and then created a rectangular solid out of it. We need that timber. Well, these are huge timbers. So now with this plan, let's go out and find the timbers. But this was not so easy. And we looked all over the eastern half of the United States, down into the southern states, Georgia, Alabama. We ended up finding the logs we needed in a stand of timber on the lower eastern shore of Virginia. Bachapongo, this was the edge of a stand of trees. And the stand of trees had been cut over several times, except one swampy corner where there were these trees that had been skipped the last 3 or 4 times the stand of trees had been cut. And here were some giant logs with 3 feet or something like that, up to 3 feet across. We managed to convince the timber buyer that these trees needed to come to our project and not get cut up into flooring. And we brought them up here. We kept them afloat in the water since they did not dry out. Traditionally, log boats were cut green, so you don't want to start with dry timber. And there we are inspecting. It took us 2 years in the search for timber. So that we shaped the logs, we joined the log. You shape them first, then you join them. We joined them not this time with iron, with steel, because the steel that you get today is not the quality of iron that John B. Harrison had to work with back in 1889. It doesn't have the durability. And so we did make a material change on this. Loblolly pine logs for loblolly pine, that remained the same, but we went with bronze drifts instead of the steel. And here you see us marrying the bottom to the top. They did match. They followed the plans. It worked. And we married the bottom to the top sides. And sent her back around the bay for an even more extensive cruise that went clear down the bay to Norfolk, clear up the Potomac to Washington. We did a great victory lap and this is why we collect these vessels, because people do not necessarily need to come to St. Michael's. We can take our exhibits to where the people are.
It's a 127-mile overnight race from Annapolis, Maryland to Norfolk, Virginia. It's a celebration of a race to market from an age that has passed into history, a time when the Chesapeake Bay hosted passenger steamers and was peppered with working boats and pleasure craft, all under sail. This is an invitation to take part in a celebration, an invitation to get out on the bay, strut your stuff, spend time with friends, and put some wind in the sails of your beautiful boat. This is an invitation to join the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. After more than 35 years, the Schooner Race has decided to add an invitational class for non-schooner boats that would like to join us in the fun. Now, whether you have a schooner or classic vessel that harkens back to that age of sail, we're inviting you to join us. This race runs the length of the bay, and participants encounter all sorts of different conditions. It's challenging, and it's a great deal of fun. From the parade of sail in Baltimore's Inner Harbor to the crack of the starting cannon off Annapolis to the early morning finish at Thimble Shoal Light at the mouth of Hampton Roads, this is a race designed to celebrate your rig, whether classic yawl, ketch, sloop, workboat, or schooner. It's a chance to test your skills and enjoy the camaraderie of new friends and old. It's a chance to be part of something big and something meaningful. As an invitational class, the criteria are simple. If you have a vessel, modern or not, which is reminiscent of the age of schooners, you are welcome to join us. In addition, if you or your organization have a mission compatible with ours, promoting awareness of the Chesapeake Bay's heritage and ecology, and or preserving these historic vessels, you'd be welcome to join us too. Applications will be considered by our race committee, and if they feel that your boat or organization would fit our parameters, you're in for a wonderful experience. Join us. Let's get your boat on the line. Or if you know of anyone else who might fit our criteria, send this over to them. Let's keep this great event alive, and let's give back to those who live along our shores. Join us for the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. It's a ride to remember. To find out more about the race and our mission of supporting not-for-profit organizations on and around the Bay, please visit us at gcbsr.org.
Life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Yeah, in my darkest times, you got me feeling like I've been walking on air. Left all my worries and cares. I've got no burdens around you. I don't care who knows I love you. 'Cause I've been so lost without you. And in my darkest times, you got me feeling like
I will say, now that we've got you guys here, we are looking for classic boats, so you don't have to be a schooner anymore. We are now talking with Pete Lesher of the great, I can do this, the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, and we have been talking about Edna Lockwood and the Bug-Eye Rig. Take it away, Pete.
Thank you. Uh, moving on to our current project. This is the buy boat Winnie Estelle, a buy boat, another peculiar Chesapeake type, open deck, pilot house toward the stern, and the name buy boat comes from its function. This was the middleman. The oysterman, oyster tonger, goes out in the beds, and he's going where he can get to from home, from his home port. which is not necessarily a market town. Oystermen typically, they live there because their towns are close to the oyster beds, but not necessarily close to the market. So it was the job of the oyster buy boat to show up every day at the same place, uh, traditionally raise a bushel basket from the halyard on that cargo mast forward, and start buying oysters, and then taking them in to Annapolis, to Baltimore, to Washington, to wherever they were going to get sold, shucked, um, processed, etc. Winnie Estelle, built 1920, uh, on by a Smith Islander, Noah T. Evans, built it for himself. He did not make his living as a boat builder, even though he built 2 or 3 vessels, including this one. He was a waterman. He was out there operating this vessel. He was operating a buy boat. And so he built this one for himself. It went through a number of different hands in the 1960s, was operating for a couple of other Smith Islanders by the name of uh, the Marshalls, Shug Marshall. Oh, gotta love these waterman nicknames, Shug. But in the mid 70s, as the oyster industry is in decline, as trucks are taking the business of the traditional buy boats, this boat is sold outside of the trade. And like a lot of Chesapeake work boats over the years, it was sold to be taken south to the Caribbean, to haul lumber in Honduras. Uh, got laid up down on a river, was seen by somebody who loved it, pulled it out, refloated it, rebuilt it out of tropical hardwood, and used it for a dive charter boat, taking passengers out to some beautiful key off of Belize. And as he was getting to a life stage, I was getting calls from him left and right for a number of years, or from one of his partners. Can the museum take on Winnie Estelle? Well, it's more than a notion to bring a boat back from the Caribbean. And we didn't do it. A gentleman from Centerville by the name of Michael Whitehill did, brought it back to the Chesapeake, uh, and put it through Coast Guard inspection, getting all the upgrades that you need to get it inspected to carry more than 6 passengers for hire. Just as he finished that process, we got to the point, we had a buy boat replica, the Mr. Jim. If you're familiar with the museum, some of you might remember this sort of buy boat had been built as a yacht, but in the style of a buy boat. And we got to the point where we were looking at other options. We ended up selling Mr. Jim. Mr. Jim herself has been rebuilt. It's down in the Bahamas, and but we were given Winnie Estelle. Very fortunate to have had the purchaser come along to say, I can help you out on this. And now, a dozen years later, the boat needed it had been rebuilt extensively down in Belize, much like Rosie Parks, except for the keel. And we began developing some issues. The Coast Guard, we had conversations with the Coast Guard, and they said, we'll let you go for the rest of the season, but you need to do something about this. And so a couple of years ago, we hauled her up out of the water for a keel replacement. Well, you don't replace the keel without replacing the entire bottom. And so we're in the process of doing that. And Winnie will be refloated again this spring. We'll get her Coast Guard inspection certificate back. We'll be doing cruises back out on the Miles River, taking people again in the water, operating, getting people out for specific programs in the near waters around St. Michael's. The work is being done again by our lead shipwrights and apprentices, and it's a project that we need to do, but it is also a teaching opportunity. That apprentice program, it's a 2-year trade school. It is state certified. The Maryland Department of Labor has approved our curriculum. Uh, you learn you learn all the wooden boat carpentry skills. Over that 4,000 hour course, we do metalworking. We've had particular apprentices who have taken different tacks, have worked with our local community college to add to that marine electronics or welding or sailmaking. Um, they come out credentialed and, as I said, debt free. And I saw a question in the chat. For some reason, the screen I'm seeing is not seeing the chat, but we've had this program going with multiple apprentices at a time since about 2000. And we now have four, and we think we'll soon have, we just got more funding. We may soon have as many as five apprentices at a time. We have the housing for that many. If we get any more, we'll have to think about the housing situation. Some of these apprentices have come through our after school program. They're local kids. We're getting our second one this year, who this is what he wants to do. He's been bitten by the bug and wants to continue his education, his post-secondary education, not in college. College isn't for everybody. I want to work with my hands. Here's my opportunity. And in some cases, we've been sort of a continuing education for one of the wooden boat schools. There are a number of these around the country. In other cases, we're taking people straight out of high school and giving them the skills that they need to be marketable, to be employable in this trade.
That's pretty impressive, Pete.
I will switch briefly over to our small craft program. Our small craft now exhibited in our 12,000 square foot Welcome Center. On the interior, we've developed an exhibition. We now have most of our small craft collection on exhibition. You see a section of that here of boats that are inspired by Chesapeake workboat types, old crabbing skiffs, but were all either built new or repurposed for pleasure. So making that work to play transition. And you will see some peeling paint up there. Maritime museums for many years over restored their boats, not valuing the evidence of wear and repair. We're getting away from that. We've done some of that, but we're getting away from that. And we have them sorted a number of places here. What you see exhibited here are a couple of boats that we've touched. The St. Michael sailing scow on the bottom. Really, all we've done is new coats of paint there. Big Bad Sid right above that. That's a production boat from actually New Jersey, Sid Craft in New Jersey. Bought by a Washington doctor for his African-American family, for his son at Highland Beach. The local club for the boys, they didn't do sailing, they did powerboat racing. You could do it with a 10 horsepower outboard motor. In that day, of course, you acquired a Mercury because a 10 horsepower Mercury was faster than a 10 horsepower Johnson or Evinrude. That was the boat you needed if you were racing. The watermen hated Mercuries. They considered them unreliable. But if you were racing, you wanted a Mercury. He got all the right things. And had some working repairs. We've not touched it. We've brushed the dust off. It is largely untouched. The boat on the top, the LJ Scow, a junior sailor boat from the Gibson Island Yacht Squadron over on the Western Shore, untouched, just as received. There are boats where we have needed to do some preservation work, but John Gardner of Mystic Seaport preached that don't over restore, don't try to do too much to the old boat. Instead, take the lines off, rebuild it, and go out and sail it. What we now call experimental archaeology. what you can learn from building the boat. In this case, these were boats meant for the St. Michael Sailing Scow, the local club's sail training boat in the 20s and 30s. It was so it was in fact pretty suitable for our after-school boat building program. And they picked it up and they built one of these. And so you can learn from what are the challenges of putting this together. The challenges were pretty minimal with this. Sailing it was quite a different matter. And you learn more about the boat from actually going out and operating it, as we did with this one. Boy, are these tough boats. They don't come around very easily. It's a good thing that Miles River Yacht Club went on and adapted Penguins and other successors to the St. Michael Sailing Scow in later years. Here's one where, again, we had to do very little. This was Vincent Serio's boat. He's the immigrant. Immigrated with his family as a boy in 1902 to Newport News, Virginia. In World War I, did not get conscripted into the army, but went off to work in an industry supporting the war at Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, built his skills after the war, opened his own shop, and was reputable enough that this immigrant boat builder was selected by none other than the Hampton Yacht Club to design their club's class. Not the stereotypical crusty old native-born boat builder, the young immigrant boat builder. But he got this job. It turned out he was a pretty good designer. He was a pretty good builder. He built many of these. And if you couldn't afford one of his boats, he built kits. You could just buy all the pieces from him, and you could do the labor of putting it together yourself. Not only did we get the last boat that he built for himself, and he was a good sailor. He sailed pretty competitively. We got his last boat, his last Hampton, number 613, which you see exhibited on the bottom there. And for some reason, when he retired in, I think it was 1972, he left a boat unfinished on one of his jigs. And that's exhibited right above it. So you get an appreciation for the boat building process. We got the Hampton, we got the jig and the partially completed Hampton. We got every single pattern. There is a pattern for every plank, every frame, every piece of the Hampton. All of those. Wonderful collection and a really compelling story. We are doing some selective rescue. So on this boat, because he kept it in pristine condition, it sat in a storage unit for years and years. We wanted it as he had left it, and so we renewed the finishes. Nothing got stripped. Just a new coat of varnish on the top, a little bit of polishing. There are others where we are being very selective about what we do. Is there something that has gone out of shape? What can we do how do you do no harm? How do you make sure that the work that we do is reversible? How do we make sure that we document everything that we do in much more of a conservation ethic than the over-restoration that I think once prevailed? There is more work. Sorry, one last piece that I'm not showing here, which is that the next stage that we're doing is as we document these boats, how do we make those documents available? We've been collecting not only boats but ships plans and design notes and so forth. That is all getting scanned on our large format scanner. We're making these records available. They're getting uploaded on the public portal on our collections website, which you can get through the museum's main website, and using that documentation in planning and executing our preservation projects on these boats. The attention is we can never ignore, far from it, the in-water boats. Those continue to need attention. But we're also paying attention to the small craft and treating them as the artifacts of the Chesapeake's maritime past that they are, and in the process passing these skills along to the next generation. Duncan, there it is.
Okay. Pete, thank
Uh,
you so much. That was so interesting. I was going to ask you a little bit about merging modern technology with traditional boat building, and you went straight to the scanner discussion. Just the other day, I was watching a computer-controlled router rounding out a hull in Sweden, and it's great to see that you've got that technology there if you wanted to use it. Most importantly, I think that your apprentice program is just such a great idea. We're always complaining that people are losing these abilities and these talents, and between your organization and others, we're doing the best to keep it coming. Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for just a few questions. If you have any here, drop them in either Q&A or in the chat. And
and there may have been some things that I missed in the chat. I think I did get to that question about how long the apprentice program has been
you
running.
did. Tell me a little bit. You have school kids come through a lot. Is that like up in uh, uh, Chestertown? Sultana has their curriculum in the schools, and I wondered if you've got the same sort of thing going on in your county.
Very much so, and we're serving not only Talbot County but surrounding counties. We know that um, field trips,
Yeah,
as important as they are, as sticky as I mean, think back to your own experience in school. What are the most memorable things that you did in elementary or middle school? It may have been field trip. It may
it
have been a
certainly
trip to a
was.
place like Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. And so we know the value of that in terms of how do you make that impact? But teachers need to actually accomplish things. They've got learning goals. They've got a curriculum that they're meeting. And so we brought in teachers for Summer Institute and said, here's what we can offer. How do we make sure these fulfill your goals?
Mm.
And we brought them back years later as the curriculum changed. Okay, how do we update this program so that it meets the updated curriculum?
So,
So
so something like a STEM type program, or
so our third grade program called the Chesapeake Best Crab Cakes that follows the crab from harvest to the plate, um, meets goals in social studies, science, and in reading for third graders. And we've got a fifth grade program as well uh, that I haven't been trained on that one. I'm less familiar with that one. Um, and you mentioned Sultana.
yeah,
Well, Sultana, just like our boats, doesn't just teach in Chestertown. Sultana comes twice a year for a week at a time to Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, and they take local students from Talbot County out on for a few
yeah,
hours for half of a school day onto the Miles River, and they do their program. And that class that was on the schooner will come back, and in the afternoon, they'll do a program at Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. And the classes that were at Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum in the morning are out on the
yeah. It's a perfect.
Sultana after lunch.
That's
So
a
we've
perfect.
got a great partnership with Sultana. We love working with Sultana, and that relationship has been there since Sultana was launched.
And such a great thing, that's for sure. Please tell us about the Screw Pile Lighthouse, they ask.
You saw a glimpse of that in my first slide, in that aerial slide. It's just off to the one side of the of the shipyard, and you saw the museum's logo at the bottom of my slides. It is the Screw Pile Lighthouse. There were once 35 of these up and down the Chesapeake Bay. They were used in North Carolina. They were used to some extent. There's one still surviving, not very well, down in Mobile Bay. But these low Screw Pile lighthouses were absolutely all over the Chesapeake, and mostly slight variations. Uh,
Well, they're so
Coast Guard,
iconic. I mean, how perfect is that for a logo?
the Coast Guard was automating beacons in the 50s and 60s. They saw once they didn't have personnel in them, these were maintenance nightmares. They were attractive nuisances. They were subject to vandalism. And so they were getting rid of them left and right. The museum managed to purchase not from the Coast Guard, but from the demolition contractor. We purchased the Hooper Strait Lighthouse in 1966, moved it here by barge, craned it ashore, and opened it to the public the following year. It's an 1879 structure. It was the second lighthouse on that site, the first one having been destroyed by ice, which was
Yeah.
a hazard to these lighthouses built on pilings. And of course, we did that on the Chesapeake because this is a very shallow bay. There are long shoals extending out, and if you want to put the lighthouse where it's actually going to be useful, you don't build it on the nearest point of land. You put it out next to the channel, and that's where Hooper Strait Lighthouse was.
It might be
Located.
instructive to explain what a screw pile is.
Sure. So they are on pilings, but one of the hazards of ice, other than ice piling up and simply shearing the thing off, is that ice will freeze around a piling, and as the tide rises, it will heave the piling up out of the mud, and you'll see docks that have these humps in them from ice heaving. They drive to pilings deeper now, and we see less of that, but that's traditionally been a problem. Well, the screw pile was exactly that. They put a thread with a big flange on the bottom of the screw. And rather than pounding it into the bottom, they turned it into the bottom. And so it had that extra area of the flange that could not get heaved out. It was, frankly, much more stable.
Yeah,
Pretty tedious to do it, but nevertheless,
that's a big
uh,
auger. Well, Pete,
indeed.
time is wrapping up. We've got a little bit of stuff going on here in the chat. And
Yeah, note about the one at Solomon's Culvert Marine Museum.
yeah,
That's
it's a
we
great one.
see Culvert as very much our sister museum.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Remarks on the Martha Lewis, the skipjack, the sister to. Let me tell something very brief about the Martha Lewis.
Yeah.
Martha Lewis was built side by side by Bronza Parks with our Rosie Parks. Launched the same year, did much the same thing. When we purchased Rosie Parks in 1975, the deal with Orville Parks was the museum, this nonprofit organization, should not be competing with Waterman. And so the handshake deal, this is not written down anywhere. The Chesapeake Bay Museum is not going to go out and dredge this boat. You can sail it, we can take people out, but you're not going to dredge oysters with it. 19 years later, in 1994, when Martha Lewis was being rebuilt, the funding for her was that this is going away. We're going to lose these things. I will pay for this project only if you will commit to continuing to dredge this vessel.
Ah,
It, Oystering had changed that, and skipjack, oyster dredging had changed that much in the 19-year period.
isn't that something? God, it's crazy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and Pete, we've come to the end of our time. Pete, I want to thank you so much. It's been fascinating. And you've got a job that I think an awful lot of people would envy.
I love what I do. I
And
truly love what I
it
do.
obviously shows. You're a great ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, do think about joining us if you can, if you've got a classic vessel for the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race in October. Having said that, I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to thank Pete Lesher once again. A job well done.
Thank you, Duncan.
All right,
Pleasure.
everybody, let's get ready for a great spring.